The South African Prisoners Organisation for Human Rights has expressed dismay at the Department of Correctional Services' urgent call to families to bring identity documents of their loved ones for them to register to vote. Support says this historical call from the DCS comes too little too late. The Prisoners' Rights Organisation says since the dawn of democracy, it has approached the DCS and the government to have their fingers on the pulse about the numbers of inmates in South Africa. Support says the call for IDs for the upcoming weekend registration is not practical, as some inmates are incarcerated away from their homes. Miles Bhudu is the national spokesperson for the South African Prisoners Organisation for Human Rights. He joins us now. Very good evening to you, Mr. Bhudu, and thank you so much for speaking to us. So you say this appeal by the Department of Correctional Services is too little too late. When did you speak to them about this? Because you say since the dawn of democracy you've been appealing to them, and I'm curious as to why they've never heeded your calls.
Well, look, I'm fascinated that the Department of Correctional Services come here so late and make public announcement and public pronouncement about green barcoded IDs and the card ID. Well, since after our first democratic elections 25 years ago, we were in and out of court, but because of lack of financial resources, we couldn't get there early with the best attorneys in the land so that this could have become a permanent project, that when you are arrested, when you are charged, and when you are in imprisonment, from the day you get arrested, the police must be able to positively identify you either with your fingers or with your ID numbers, so that when you get into the system, we know that this is a South African citizen, and when you get into the system, in your communal warrant, there must be some positive identification in terms of a temporary ID or a permanent ID that would make it very much easier when we need those IDs for the time to register with the intention to vote for a political party of your choice. It fell on deaf ears for 25 long, drawn-out years. Now, 2 days before the registration, then they make an announcement, and I think it is all about mediocrity, nothing else.
All right, so we'll get to the election parts of it, but I'm just curious, so what is the status quo? So when you're arrested, beyond the biometric system, how do they confirm, as you say, that the individual before them is who they say they are or who the police docket says you are? And I'm not necessarily making the link, but South Africa has been rocked by a scandal. We know that of the so-called Facebook rapist, Thabo Bester, his body being mistaken for another in an escape attempt. So how does the system work?
Well, in fact, we are living in a digital migration revolution, the 21st century. The police should have been able, a long time ago, to get connected with the Department of Home Affairs by just getting apps. They're talking about apps nowadays. They should have then worked out a program. How do we, as a country that is not stagnant, but a country that is in transition, work and use the technology at our advance to make sure that people get arrested who are South Africans and those who are not South Africans can be easily identified, so that when you give stats, how many South African people are behind bars, you can give accurate stats, and those stats can be backed up by technology. But in fact, we have been screaming and yelling for years, not only for IDs, but saying that organizations that want prisoners and to vote for them must come into prison and canvass and campaign and educate those potential voters what the manifesto is of that particular party. And then they said, no, it's a security risk. They said that 20 years ago, and they keep on saying it today, and that is unconstitutional. You cannot allow people to have the right to vote constitutionally, and they cannot be canvassed. Political parties cannot go into prison and canvass and campaign, and also make sure that these people know exactly what is the vote going to do for them, because we are all told that your vote is your voice.
So what kind of political canvassing campaigning does support want for prisoners? Are you saying you have no access to the audio-visual campaigns or even the ones in print that political parties usually engage in? Are you saying you want rallies to occur at prisons?
Well, like you know, it's even going to be much easier in a confined environment. It's not like outside here where you go and set up gazebos and stand at the corners to lure people to come and register, and then from there canvass them to vote. You go to the prison, they are there, they are waiting for you. It is supposed to be so easy to do the campaigning in prisons, but we understand why the government has decided not to do that and collude with the IEC, collude with the Department of Home Affairs, and also with the Department of Finance, because if you don't have an ID, and you cannot afford the 80 rands for very obvious reasons, or the 110 rands because you are behind bars, the Department of Finance, the finance minister should have come to the party and fund that project, because when you are behind bars, you are state property.
So, Mr. Bhudu, if I understand you correctly, you're saying that the reason that the DCS is not allowing political parties to campaign at prisons is because it's part of some big money scam. I'd want to pose it to you the possibility of compromised security. Would that not be an issue the minute you start having political parties holding campaign rallies at prisons?
Well, the security thing is an old, very old song. You find it everywhere in the world. When correctional officers don't want to do their work, they will go and hide behind the security jargon. You know, the Department of Correctional Services has got a special unit called Emergency Support Team. We call them bouncers. Prisoners call them ninjas. Outside here, they are called mercenaries, and they are called vigilante group. There's no such a thing that they going to be some security risk for political parties to come and canvass there. People who are in prison are not barbarics. They are not animals. They are human beings. And we told them for many years that, guys, you can use your vote to change and to participate not only in the democracy of the country, but to work towards transforming the criminal justice system from the police to the judiciary and correctional services. And they understood that.
Mr. Bhudu, calling them barbarians is a word that you've used. I don't think anybody has suggested it during this conversation. The question of security is raised because it is a real threat. There are reports of people fleeing prisons because of lax security. There are reports of prisoners having contraband. There are also questions that have continuously been raised that if people who are incarcerated, should they enjoy the same benefits that people who are not in prison? So is that what you're saying, that the only difference should be that they be behind bars?
Well, look, I think we've gone past this debate. It's almost 30 years now where we give the impression that people who are behind bars are animals, are very dangerous human beings. No, they are not. They are treated like animals because those who do that get away with it because it's a confined environment and nobody wants to know what is happening behind bars until such time you end up there or somebody very close to you end up behind bars, and then you will really realize that our prisons are not holiday resorts, they are not holidays. And those who say that our prisons are holiday resorts or hotels is one of two things. It's either you have never been to prison or you've never been to a hotel. These are human beings that are supposed to be made to understand that they've got a responsibility to serve their duty to the community, and the system must assist them, both private and public sector, to invest in their education, their training, their skills development, so that you get to the buzzword called rehabilitation and you reintegrate them as useful, lawful, abiding citizens that can be
Mr.
productive.
Bhudu, it's unfortunate that we have run out of time, but I'd like to say to you this very pointedly. I think it's very patronizing to suggest that asking you a question about the kind of environment that should exist between those who are incarcerated or not is my saying that people who are in prison ought to be treated like animals, and that the situation in prison is comfortable and that there are no inhumane conditions. So I'd like you to please correct the view that you are trying to infer there. Thank you very much. Support spokesperson Golden Miles Bhudu.